This is my true story. I was a lonely man, living in silence for years. My wife had left me long ago, and my only son never called again. I thought my life had ended in emptiness, until one rainy night on the highway changed everything. I saw 6 little girls standing in the storm, barefoot and trembling. I stopped the car, thinking I could help. I took them home, fed them, and called them my daughters. For the first time, I felt alive again. But what I discovered later froze my heart forever. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and please subscribe. The rain was coming down so hard that night it looked like the sky itself was breaking open. The wipers on my old car could barely keep up. I was driving home from the city, the same lonely road I took every week. No lights, no other cars, just endless darkness. The kind of darkness that feels alive, pressing against the windows, making you wonder if you're the only soul left awake in the world. I had no one waiting for me at home, so I never drove fast. But that night, something made me slow down even more. Through the blur of rain, my headlights caught a strange sight. 6 small figures walking along the side of the road, barefoot, holding hands, soaked to the bone. Their white dresses clung to their tiny bodies. Their hair was plastered to their faces, and they didn't move like children should. They didn't run or cry. They just walked, side by side, heads slightly bowed, like they had been walking for a long, long time. I stopped the car and rolled down the window. The rain hit my face like cold needles. "Are you lost?" I asked. But none of them answered. The oldest one, maybe 10 years old, just looked up at me with wide, empty eyes. Not angry, not scared, just empty. Behind her, the younger ones stood close, holding onto her dress like chicks hiding under a mother bird. Something in my chest twisted. I couldn't just leave them there in the storm. I turned off the engine, grabbed my coat, and stepped out. The ground was soft and muddy, and my shoes sank deep. The wind cut through me like a blade. When I got closer, I saw that their feet were covered in dirt and small cuts. One of them held a torn teddy bear, soaked and limp. I knelt down and said softly, "You'll get sick out here. Come with me. I'll take you somewhere safe." Still, no one spoke. The oldest one looked at the others, then back at me, and after a few seconds, she nodded once. That tiny nod felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. I opened the car door and helped them in, one by one. They sat in silence, 6 small bodies, dripping water onto the seats, hands folded neatly in their laps. The air inside the car grew cold and quiet. When I turned on the heater, a faint mist filled the windows, and their reflections flickered in the glass like faint shadows. I drove to the nearest gas station, about 10 miles down the road. The lights were bright and warm, and the sound of rain against the roof was softer there. I bought 6 bowls of hot soup and 6 small blankets. They sat in a booth at the back, eating slowly, never speaking, but their eyes followed every move I made. I remember thinking how strange it was. They looked so calm, almost too calm for children who had just been found in the middle of nowhere. When they finished eating, the smallest one finally whispered something. Her voice was barely there, like a breeze. "Thank you," she said, just those 2 words. It was the first sound any of them made. I smiled and nodded, telling her she didn't need to thank me. But deep down, something about that voice chilled me. It sounded old, far too old for someone so young. I paid the bill and drove them to my house. They fell asleep along the way, their heads resting against each other's shoulders. The youngest held onto my sleeve, even in her dreams. For the first time in years, I felt something in me soften, a quiet sense of purpose, like maybe I wasn't meant to be alone after all. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the rain had stopped. The night was still, the kind of stillness that makes every sound echo. I carried each of them inside, one by one, laid them down on blankets, and turned off the lights. That night, as I sat in the dark living room listening to their soft breathing, I thought I had found a reason to live again. I didn't know then that I had brought home something far beyond what my heart could understand. I had no one left in this world. My wife had walked out decades ago, leaving only a note and silence behind. She had found comfort with another man, someone richer, younger, stronger. I didn't chase her. I just watched her shadow fade into the rain that day and told myself maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't enough. Years later, my only son followed the same path. He left for the city, chasing money, chasing noise. His last words before leaving still echoed in my mind. "I'll call you, Dad." But years passed, and the phone never rang. My house had grown old with me. The walls carried dust instead of laughter. The chairs sat empty. The rooms smelled like closed books and old wood. Every evening, I'd cook just enough for one, a habit that hurt less the more I repeated it. Some nights I'd sit at the window watching the streetlights flicker, wondering if somewhere out there, someone even remembered I existed. So when I saw those 6 little girls on the highway, something inside me moved for the first time in years. It wasn't pity, it wasn't obligation, it was a strange, sudden warmth, like an old clock starting to tick again. I told myself, maybe fate was giving me one more chance to be needed, one more chance to matter. I didn't care who they were or where they came from. I only saw what they didn't have: dry clothes, a home, warmth, a hand to hold. I had all those things, and no one to give them to. The balance felt too cruel to ignore. That night, after I brought them home and tucked them into makeshift beds, I sat on the edge of my chair, watching the rain stop outside. I thought about how strange life could be, how one lonely road could lead to something that felt like family again. I thought about my wife, about my son, about every empty dinner table that had ever sat waiting for voices that never came. For once, I wasn't alone. In the dim light, I looked at those small faces as they slept. They were all different. One had a small scar on her cheek. Another had hair so long it brushed her chin. One held a little bracelet made of thread. But something about them felt connected. They breathed in rhythm, turned in sync, as though they had learned to move as one body, one soul. I didn't know their names, but I already knew what I wanted to call them: my daughters. I remember whispering to myself, maybe this is my second life. I thought God had sent them to fill the years I had wasted in silence. The house that once felt like a tomb suddenly had warmth again. I made tea and left it on the table, smiling at the thought that I would have breakfast companions again. The smell of soup, the hum of their soft breathing, the way one of them murmured in her sleep, all of it made the house feel alive. It was strange, though. When the thunder cracked outside, none of them flinched. Not one. Most children would hide or cry at that sound. But they just slept, calm and still, like they were used to storms. That thought lingered for a moment, but I brushed it away. I didn't want logic that night. I wanted peace. I stood by the window until dawn, the rain gone, the road empty. The clouds began to clear, and the faint orange glow of morning light slipped across the floor. I could almost hear laughter again, the kind that hadn't touched these walls in decades. For the first time since my wife left, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. But I had no idea that the girls I had rescued from the storm weren't meant to be saved. They were meant to remind me of something far deeper, something I wasn't ready to face. The next morning, I woke early to the smell of wet earth drifting through the window. The girls were still asleep, huddled together under the same blanket like a single body made of 6 small hearts. Their faces were calm, peaceful even. But something about their stillness didn't feel like normal sleep. It was too quiet. I stood in the doorway for a while just watching them, unsure if I was doing the right thing. A stranger bringing 6 lost children home. It didn't sound right. But I had already made my choice. I couldn't leave them on that highway. I made breakfast, simple things, eggs and toast. And the smell slowly filled the house. One by one, they woke up. None of them spoke much. They just looked at me as if waiting for instructions. The oldest, the one with sharp eyes and that faint scar near her cheek, seemed to lead the others. When she stood, they followed. When she sat, they stopped. I poured warm milk into cups and handed them out. They drank silently, but I saw something in their eyes soften. Trust, maybe, or the memory of it. After breakfast, I gave them small towels and let them use the bathroom. Their small feet left muddy prints across the floor, but I didn't mind. It felt good to have life in the house again. Movement, noise, something other than my own slow footsteps. When they finished, I found an old box of clothes in the attic, leftovers from charity drives. The clothes were too big, but they smiled anyway. It was the first time I had seen them smile, and it broke something in me, a piece of the wall I'd built around my heart for years. By afternoon, I decided to take them into town. I didn't tell anyone they were staying with me yet. I just wanted to feed them properly, to see them laugh in daylight. We stopped at a small cafe. They sat together, shoulders touching, never apart. People in the cafe stared. 6 quiet little girls with identical blank faces and one old man sitting beside them. But I didn't care. For once, I felt proud of something again. I bought them soup and bread, and they ate slowly, carefully. Every time one reached for the spoon, the others waited until she took her turn. It was strange. They moved like they had rehearsed this their whole lives. Not one of them ever spoke above a whisper. Not one asked for more, though I could see hunger in their eyes. I ordered extra plates anyway. When the rain started again, I drove them to a small shop to buy blankets. The owner asked, "All yours?" I smiled weakly and said, "Yes. All mine." The words felt strange on my tongue, but they warmed me from inside. He laughed, said I was brave to take on 6 at my age. I laughed back, but something in his tone lingered, a mix of curiosity and unease. That night, when we returned home, I showed them how to turn on the lamps, where the towels were, and where they could keep their things. They followed every word quietly. Before bed, I told them they were safe now, that nothing bad would happen here. One of them, the smallest, tugged on my sleeve, holding up her little hand for me to take. Her fingers were cold. I held them until she fell asleep. The rain eased outside. The sound of the droplets against the roof was softer now, almost comforting. For the first time in decades, I felt like I had done something good. I didn't know what they had been through. I didn't know who they had lost. I only knew I had found them. Or maybe they had found me. The loneliness I had carried for so long began to fade, replaced by something new. But deep down, in some quiet part of my mind, a single thought whispered again and again. Why were they walking alone on that road? I didn't have an answer yet, and the truth was something I never could have imagined. The days that followed felt almost like a dream. For the first time in years, my house was filled with voices, soft, light, and almost musical. The 6 girls turned every quiet corner into something alive. The rooms that once echoed only my footsteps now carried the sound of tiny ones running, giggling, whispering to each other in their strange, gentle way. I bought them toys from a thrift shop, painted their room with bright colors, and hung curtains covered in tiny yellow flowers. It felt like I was rebuilding my life one smile at a time. They each had small habits that made them unique. The oldest one, the one I called Anna, would braid the younger one's hair every morning before breakfast. The second, Rosa, liked to sit near the window and watch the road, never saying why. The twins, Lily and May, always held hands even while sleeping. The 5th, Clara, hummed softly whenever she was scared. And the youngest, Eva, the one who had first said thank you, followed me everywhere, always carrying that torn teddy bear. It amazed me how quickly they adjusted to life in the house. They never fought, never complained, and never asked for anything. If one was thirsty, another would pour her water before she even spoke. If one dropped her food, another would quietly pick it up. It was like they shared one thought, one heartbeat. I told myself it was because they'd been through something terrible together. Maybe they had no one else but each other. That thought helped me sleep at night. Each morning, I made breakfast for all of us. 7 plates now instead of 1. I'd pour the tea, set the table, and watch them eat with quiet joy. It was simple, but to me, it was everything I had ever wanted. A family. Neighbors began to notice. They saw me walking with the girls down the street, hand in hand. They smiled and said things like, "You've done a good thing, old man," or "God bless you for helping them." I smiled back but didn't tell them much. Something in me wanted to keep the girls private, safe, hidden from the world. At night, I'd read to them from an old storybook I found in the attic. Fairy tales, mostly. The kind my wife once read to my son before he stopped listening. The girls would sit close together, eyes fixed on the pictures, faces soft with calm. When the story ended, they'd always say the same thing at once. "Good night, Papa." 6 small voices, all together, perfectly timed. It made me smile every time. But slowly, little things began to happen. Small, strange things I tried to ignore. The first time, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of giggling. It was faint, like it came from far away. When I checked their room, they were all asleep. Or at least, they looked like they were. Their eyes were closed, but their lips were moving, whispering words I couldn't understand. Another night, I heard footsteps outside my door. Slow, deliberate steps, back and forth, back and forth. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty, and the air felt colder than usual. The next morning, all 6 girls were sitting at the table, smiling as if nothing had happened. Sometimes I'd find their drawings on the walls, not of flowers or houses, but of a large white building on a hill, surrounded by trees. Always the same house, always drawn in perfect detail. I asked them once what it was, but they only looked down at their plates and stayed quiet. Still, I didn't push. I didn't want to ruin what we had. Whatever secrets they carried, I told myself they would share them when they were ready. I started calling them my daughters. It came naturally, as if the word had been waiting on my tongue for years. And every time I said it, they smiled. That smile became my reason to keep living. I didn't realize then that the love I had built around them was only a fragile wall, one that would soon crack wide open, because the truth was already inside my home, and it was waiting for me to see it. It started with small things easy to overlook if you weren't paying attention. But when you live alone for most of your life, you learn to notice the smallest details. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry in their room, I found something inside one of the bags the girls had brought with them. It was an old photograph, its corners burned and edges torn. In it, the 6 girls stood in front of a large white house with black window frames. Behind them, a woman's hand rested on each of their shoulders, only the hand, not the face. The strange part was their expressions. Children in pictures usually smile, but these didn't. Their eyes looked straight into the camera, wide, glassy, and afraid. I turned the photo over. There was no date, no name. Just one faint line written in blue ink. Home on the hill. The words made something twist in my stomach. I'd driven that same road for years. There were no houses on any hill nearby, at least none that I remembered. Still, the image stuck in my mind like a splinter. The next clue came a few days later. I had gone to fetch water from the backyard pump. As I passed the window, I saw the girls standing in a circle in the living room, holding hands. They were whispering softly, their heads slightly bowed. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the sound didn't feel like prayer. It was too slow, too heavy. When I opened the door, they stopped instantly, all 6 heads turning toward me at once. For a second, none of them moved. Then the oldest one smiled and said, "We were playing." That night, I couldn't sleep. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe I was just too old, too tired, too used to the silence that had ruled my life for so long. But then, a few days later, I overheard something that turned my blood cold. It was early morning. I had gone to make tea when I heard them talking in their room. Their voices were hushed but clear. The youngest asked, "When do we go back?" The oldest replied, "When he finds out." My hand froze around the kettle. When who finds out? And what was there to find out? I waited for more, but the house fell silent again. Later that week, I noticed another strange thing. They never went near mirrors. I had an old one hanging near the hallway, and whenever they walked past it, they turned their heads away or looked at the floor. Once I caught Eva, the youngest, staring at her reflection for a long time, her eyes unblinking. When she realized I was watching, she whispered, "It's not me," and walked away. That night, I went back to their room while they slept. The moonlight came through the curtains, falling on their faces. They looked peaceful, almost too still. Near the bed, I found a small notebook with rough sketches inside. The same white house from the photo, drawn over and over. Sometimes with smoke rising from its roof. Sometimes with flames. On one page, I saw 6 small figures standing in front of the burning house. Above them, a single word was written. Home. My hands trembled. I flipped through more pages, all filled with the same drawings. It didn't make sense. I didn't want to believe what I was thinking. But deep down, a quiet part of me already knew. The next morning, I asked gently where they were from. Only Anna spoke. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were far away. "We came from the White House on the hill," she said. "It was our home." The words hit me like thunder. The White House. The same one from the photograph. The same one from the drawings. Later that evening, I turned on the local radio while making dinner. A news story came on. Short, routine, almost forgotten. 2 weeks ago, a house fire on the hill claimed the lives of a couple and their 6 daughters, the reporter said. Police are still investigating the cause. The children's bodies were buried at St. Mary's Cemetery. The spoon slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I didn't breathe for a full minute. The girls were laughing in the next room. I couldn't sit still after that broadcast. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and every sound in the house made me turn my head. The laughter of the girls from the other room no longer sounded like comfort. It sounded distant, wrong, like a song playing from somewhere too far away. I waited until they went to sleep that night, their soft breathing echoing through the hallway. Then I took my old car keys from the hook, put on my coat, and left quietly, without turning on the lights. The drive to the hill wasn't far, maybe 15 minutes at most, but that night it felt endless. The road was wet again from rain, the same kind of rain that had fallen the night I found them. I followed the winding road until I saw the yellow police tape fluttering in the wind. The ground beyond it was black, scorched, lifeless, the air still carrying a faint smell of smoke even after all those days. I parked the car and stepped out. The mud clung to my shoes as I walked closer. The remains of the house stood like broken ribs against the dark sky. Beams twisted, walls collapsed, windows melted into empty frames. The silence was unbearable. It wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, the kind of silence that holds a story in its grip. Near what was once the front porch, I saw a small figure standing, a man, thin, wearing a dark coat, holding a flashlight. He turned when he heard my steps. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. His voice had no anger in it, only warning. "I just wanted to see," I replied. "This house, it burned 2 weeks ago, didn't it?" He nodded. "Yes, tragic case. Whole family gone. Husband, wife, 6 daughters. No one made it out." I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry. "You're sure?" I asked. "I was here that night," he said. "Volunteer firefighter. We found the bodies in the basement, all of them. Poor souls. They said the father tried to save them but passed out from the smoke. The girls, they were found holding hands." My stomach turned cold. "Holding hands," I repeated under my breath. He shined his flashlight toward the burned floorboards. "Right here," he said. "This is where they were." I didn't say anything. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Then he added, "They buried them all at St. Mary's Cemetery. Small coffins, all in one row." The words barely reached me. The wind picked up, blowing ashes across my shoes. For a moment, I thought I heard giggling, faint, distant, familiar. I turned sharply, shining my own flashlight toward the trees, but there was nothing there, just darkness. The man looked at me strangely. "You all right, sir?" I forced a nod. "Yes, just thought I heard something." He sighed. "This place does that to you. Feels like they're still here sometimes." He looked toward the hill, his voice dropping lower. "You know, people say the girls were special. Always together, never apart. Some say their bond was stronger than death." I stood frozen. He gave me a polite nod and started walking back toward his truck. "Best you leave, sir." These ruins aren't good for old bones or restless minds. I didn't move for a while. I just stood there staring at the blackened remains, at the spot where he said they were found. Then I noticed something half buried in the mud, a small silver locket, tarnished but intact. I bent down, picked it up, and wiped it with my sleeve. Inside were 6 tiny faces, the same 6 faces that now lived under my roof. The flashlight slipped from my hand. It hit the ground with a dull thud, flickering once before dying. I stood there in the dark, breathing hard, holding that locket, unable to make sense of anything. When I finally got back in the car, I didn't start it right away. I just sat there staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, and for a split second, I thought I saw small faces smiling in the back seat. The drive back home felt unreal. The road looked the same, the trees looked the same, but the air had changed. Every mile between me and that burned house felt like I was crossing a line between what I believed and what I could no longer deny. The locket sat heavy in my pocket, pressing against my leg like a heartbeat. Every time I touched it, I saw their faces again. 6 small smiles that now felt like echoes of something not meant to return. When I reached my gate, the lights in the house were already on. I froze. I had turned them off before leaving. The curtains fluttered though the windows were closed. My heart began to pound harder. The air was cold, but I was sweating. I stepped out of the car, my shoes crunching on the gravel, and for the first time in years, I felt real fear. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear the ticking of the clock in the hall, the faint whistle of wind through the cracks in the door. I called softly, "Girls?" No answer. The smell of burnt wood drifted faintly through the house, sharp and bitter, out of place. I followed it into the living room. The fireplace was cold, untouched, yet the smell grew stronger, almost choking. And then I saw them. All 6 were sitting at the table, perfectly still, hands folded, heads slightly tilted as if waiting for me. Their dresses were clean, their hair brushed, their faces calm. But their eyes looked different. Darker, deeper, like they held something infinite behind them. I forced a smile, though my voice cracked. "It's late," I said softly. "You should be asleep." No one moved. Then Anna, the oldest, slowly raised her head. "Did you see our house?" she asked. Her voice was gentle, but it carried something hollow underneath. My throat tightened. "Yes," I whispered. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "It's beautiful now," she said. Beautiful. That word made my chest ache. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the locket, placing it on the table. "This was there," I said. "It belongs to you." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, little Ava stood, walked toward the table, and touched the locket with her tiny fingers. The room felt colder instantly. The candlelight flickered, though there was no wind. She looked up at me and whispered, "Thank you for finding us, Papa." My breath caught. "Finding you," I repeated. Anna stood now too. "We were waiting," she said softly, "for someone to bring us home." My legs weakened. I stumbled back, hitting the wall. I wanted to speak, to ask, to beg for reason, but no words came. My mind was a flood of everything I'd heard at that burned house, every detail the man had told me. The 6 daughters, the basement, the fire, the hands. I looked at them again. 6 small shapes now standing together, their hands linked, eyes fixed on me. Rosa tilted her head. "Don't be scared," she said in that same soft tone. "You helped us." I tried to breathe, but it felt like the air had thickened. "Helped you," I managed to say. Anna smiled. "You brought us back." And suddenly, I understood. I hadn't saved anyone that night. I hadn't given 6 lost children a home. I had opened my door to something that should have stayed in the dark. They weren't walking the highway because they were lost. They were walking because they were looking for me. The truth sank in like ice through my bones. The kindness that had filled my lonely heart had become the bridge between worlds. And now, the bridge was open. They stepped closer, one by one, their small feet silent on the floor. The locket lay between us, gleaming faintly in the dim light. Anna reached out, touched my trembling hand, and whispered, "Now we can rest." The room went cold. Every light in the house flickered once, then went out. Days turned into weeks, and somehow life found a strange rhythm again. The fear I felt that night, the cold in my bones, the way my breath had caught in my chest, faded slowly into something else. Not comfort exactly, but acceptance. The girls stayed. Every morning when I woke, they were there, sitting at the table, smiling softly, waiting for breakfast. Their eyes no longer seemed hollow. They were calm, peaceful, as if they had finally found what they were looking for. I told myself that maybe I had too. I cooked for them every day, just like before. Soup, bread, tea, the simple meals I had always made for myself. The bowls never emptied, but somehow they were always clean in the morning. They still called me Papa. It sounded softer now, almost like a memory floating in the air. At first I tried to convince myself everything was normal. Maybe I had imagined the fire, the locket, the man on the hill. Maybe grief had made me see ghosts where there were none. But deep down, I knew the truth. The house had changed. The air carried a different stillness. The shadows moved slower now, as though they were alive. The girls began to help me around the house. They dusted shelves, washed the floors, and tended to the small garden outside. When they walked, their feet made no sound. The neighbors stopped by less and less, though I never understood why. Once, the mailman came to deliver a letter but froze when he saw the girls through the window. His face turned pale, and he left without saying a word. I asked the girls later what he had seen. They only smiled and said, "Not everyone can see what's meant for them." I should have been afraid, but I wasn't. My life had been so full of loss that even the impossible felt like mercy. They were quiet, kind, and gentle. They filled the empty spaces my family had left behind. When I was sick, they sat by my bed. When I was lonely, they told me stories in whispers. Stories about gardens that never die and nights that never end. I listened, even when I didn't understand. Time passed differently in those years. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and see them sitting in the living room, bathed in silver light, humming the same tune they had hummed on the first night I met them. The melody was sad, but soft. I never interrupted. I'd just sit quietly and listen until morning came. 4 years went by like that. Seasons changed, but the girls never aged. Their faces stayed the same, their laughter stayed the same, even the way they held hands never changed. I stopped questioning it. I didn't want to break whatever fragile peace had found me. They had given me a purpose, and I had given them a home. Every year on the anniversary of that night, I drove back to the hill. I brought flowers, 6 small bouquets, 1 for each girl. I'd lay them near the ruins, whispering a prayer. The wind always picked up when I spoke their names, as if answering me. Then I'd return home, and they'd be waiting by the window, smiling faintly, as though they had known exactly where I'd been. People in town began to whisper about me. Some said I had gone mad, that I lived alone talking to ghosts. Others said I was blessed, protected by angels in the form of children. I didn't argue with either story. Maybe both were true. The truth is, I stopped caring whether they were real or not. Love had returned to my house, even if it came from somewhere beyond life. I had lost my wife, my son, my reason to wake up in the morning. But fate, in its strange mercy, had given me 6 small reasons to keep breathing. And so I did. For 4 quiet years, I lived as a father again. A father to 6 daughters who didn't belong to this world, but somehow belonged to me. It happened on a morning brighter than most. The kind of morning where the air feels light, the sun slips through the curtains, and for a moment you believe the world has forgiven you. I had gone into town to buy gifts for the girls, small dresses, ribbons, and new shoes. It had been 4 years since that night on the highway, and I wanted to surprise them. They had never asked for anything, but I wanted to give them something beautiful, something that would remind them they were loved. I remember feeling happy as I walked through the market. I could almost hear their laughter in my head, soft, distant, and warm. I bought 6 matching dresses, pale blue with tiny lace collars. I picked out a basket of apples because Eva loved to hold them, even if she never ate them. I even bought a birthday cake, though it wasn't anyone's birthday. It just felt right. I wanted that night to be special. I wanted to thank them for saving me from my own loneliness. When I reached home, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The kind of silence that presses on your chest until it hurts. No footsteps, no laughter, no soft humming from the kitchen. The door was unlocked, but the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air felt different, colder, emptier. The smell of soup that always lingered was gone. "Girls?" I called out. No answer. I walked through every room. Their beds were made, the blankets neatly folded, the pillows fluffed. On the wall above their beds, 6 drawings hung in perfect order, each one a picture of the same house on the hill, only this time, the flames were gone. The house stood whole again. Beneath each drawing was a single name written in a child's handwriting: Anna, Rosa, Lily, May, Clara, Ava. My knees went weak. I checked the living room. The locket that had sat on the table was gone. So was the old teddy bear. Their shoes were lined up by the door, still wet from the rain the night before. But the shoes were empty. The chairs they always sat on were slightly turned toward the window, as if they had been waiting for something. Or someone. Outside, the garden was untouched. The flowers they had planted bloomed in perfect rows, swaying softly in the wind. 6 small butterflies rested on the petals, 1 on each flower. I stared until my eyes blurred. Inside, I searched again, calling their names until my voice cracked. Nothing. No sound, no trace. Only one thing remained. A faint humming. The same song they used to hum at night. It came from their room. I followed the sound, every hair on my neck standing on end. When I entered, the humming stopped. The curtains moved gently, though the windows were closed. On the floor, I found a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it. In the same soft handwriting were the words, "Papa, thank you for giving us a home. The road is calling again. Don't be sad. We were never lost, only waiting. You can rest now." Tears blurred the words before I finished reading. I sank onto the bed and wept, not from fear this time, but from a hollow ache that filled my chest. The house was empty again, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt complete, as if the purpose of their return had ended, and now they had simply gone where they were meant to be. That night, I sat by the window until dawn. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying faint laughter, distant, fading, but unmistakably theirs. 6 voices blending into one. The sun rose over the hill, and for the first time, I saw something glimmering in the far distance, the faint outline of a white house standing in the light. Whole. Peaceful. Waiting. I smiled through my tears. They hadn't vanished. They had gone home. The next morning, I woke with a heavy stillness pressing against my chest. The kind that makes you question if what you lived was ever real. The sun poured through the curtains, but it didn't touch the corners of the room, as if the light itself refused to remember. I stood slowly, walked to the doorway, and listened. Silence. Only the clock ticking in the hall. Only the faint rustle of wind moving through the empty house. For a moment, I thought maybe they were playing hide-and-seek again. I called their names, Anna, Rosa, Lily, May, Clara, Eva, waiting for the giggle that always followed. None came, only the echo of my voice bouncing off the walls like a hollow prayer. I searched the house again, though I already knew. Every room was neat, every bed made, every plate washed. But their small touches, the tiny ribbons on the window, the old teddy bear on the shelf, the drawings on the wall, were gone. It was as if someone had wiped their existence clean. I opened the wardrobe. Empty. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet like sighs. The scent of flowers that used to linger after their baths was gone too. I refused to believe they had vanished. I packed a bag with food and water, put on my old jacket, and went back to the road where I'd first found them. The same stretch of highway, the same curve near the trees, the same rusted sign half hidden by grass. I stood there for hours, waiting, hoping to see 6 small shapes walking toward me again through the mist. But the only thing that came was rain. I went to the police station in town. The officer on duty looked young, polite, tired. I told him everything, how I had found 6 girls on the highway, how I'd taken them in, how they had lived with me for years before disappearing. He listened quietly, then frowned. "Sir," he said slowly, "are you sure? We don't have any record of you reporting missing children. No case like that ever existed." My heart thudded. "That's impossible," I said. "They were here. Everyone in town saw them." He shook his head gently. "No one ever reported 6 missing girls. And you live alone, don't you, at the edge of town?" I felt dizzy. No, they were real. They were my daughters." He hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe you've been through a lot, sir. Sometimes the mind—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. I saw it in his eyes. Pity. The kind reserved for those who've lost touch with what's real. I left without another word. I tried the neighbors next. The woman across the road used to wave at us every morning. When I asked if she'd seen the girls, she looked confused. "What girls?" she said. "You mean your nieces? You never had any children, did you?" My throat closed. "You saw them," I said. "They used to pick flowers in your yard." Her smile faltered. "You must be mistaken," she whispered. "I've never seen anyone with you." I stumbled back home that evening under the gray sky, the streets blurred by rain. The house felt smaller than before, darker. I sat in the living room staring at the empty chairs, waiting for their laughter to fill the silence. It never did. I began going through old photos, hoping to find proof, a picture, a footprint, a strand of hair, anything. But every photo frame in the house was empty. Even the ones I remembered taking had nothing inside. Just blank glass. I went to their room one last time. The drawings were gone, but faint outlines remained on the wall, like ghosts of color that refused to fade. I sank to my knees and pressed my hand to the cold floor. "If you were real," I whispered, "give me a sign." The house creaked. The wind moved through the open window, and then, faintly, softly, I heard it. The same humming tune. The one they always sang at night. It came from somewhere far away, yet close enough to reach my heart. I didn't move. I just closed my eyes and listened until the sound faded. People say I live alone now. Maybe they're right. Maybe to them I do. But I know what I saw. I know who I loved. And sometimes, when the rain hits the road, I still see 6 small figures walking hand in hand, heading home.